I thought I was alone in the house that night, but around midnight I heard footsteps, soft, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway just outside my door. At first I told myself it was the house settling, but the sound wasn't random. It was pacing. It had been one of those exhausting Fridays where every minute at work felt like an hour. By the time I got home, all I wanted was quiet. No phone calls, no small talk, just me and the stillness. My parents were at our shore house. My brother was out of state, and for the first time in months, the whole place was mine. The air upstairs always felt different when I was alone. Thinner somehow, like the walls were holding their breath. I remember lying in bed, the book in my hands half open, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the ticking of the clock across the room. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows, making them creak in that way old glass does. A long, tired sigh. Then came the first sound, a single creak from the hallway floorboard, the kind of sound that only happens when someone's weight shifts. I waited for it to happen again, telling myself it was nothing, until I realized exactly where that noise had come from. Right outside the guest room door, and that's when I remembered. I never locked it. For a few seconds, I didn't move. The silence on the other side of that door was so complete, it almost sounded like the house had stopped breathing with me. Then, a low mechanical rumble from below. The vibration rolled up through the floorboards, faint but steady. The garage door. It took my half-awake brain a moment to place it. That shuddering hum was something I'd heard 100 times before. Only this time, it didn't make sense. My parents were at the shore. My brother was in Baltimore. Nobody should have been home. I sat up too fast and the book slid off my chest. My ears strained for any hint of a car engine. Footsteps, voices, anything. But there was nothing except the heavy drumming of my pulse. When the vibration stopped, I crept toward the window. The blinds were half closed, slats cutting the outside world into narrow strips of night. From where I stood, I could see the garage door wide open, a black mouth gaping toward the driveway. No headlights, no movement, just the open dark. My skin prickled. Maybe it had glitched. It happened once before, during a storm. I held on to that thought like it was a lifeline. Still, I couldn't shake the sound of those footsteps outside my door. I crossed the room quietly and reached for the lock, turning it until the latch clicked. It sounded too loud in the stillness. I kept listening. The refrigerator hummed again. A pipe knocked somewhere in the walls. Normal noises, familiar ones. But once you've heard something that shouldn't be there, every sound feels wrong. After a minute that stretched far too long, I went to the closet. There was an old aluminum bat leaning in the corner, something from when my brother and I used to play in the yard. It felt ridiculous holding it, but also necessary. I kept the light off and opened the bedroom door just enough to see the hallway. Nothing. The smell of warm wood and old paint drifted in from the landing. Step by step, I made my way down the narrow staircase. Every creak sounded like a gunshot. I paused halfway, listening again for the garage, for voices, for anything. Then, a thud, soft but clear, from the far end of the house. My grip on the bat tightened until my palms burned. I whispered to myself, "It's nothing." Just the door settling, just air pressure. But I already knew I didn't believe that. There was weight to the sound, deliberate movement, not a random shift. At the bottom of the stairs, the air felt cooler. The faint smell of motor oil hung in the air, which meant the garage door really had opened. I rounded the corner toward the kitchen, my heart pressing hard against my ribs. That's when I heard them. Voices, faint, low, two of them. I froze. The sound came from the opposite side of the house near my parents' room. A whisper of movement, a drawer sliding open, the dull clink of metal against wood. I stayed completely still, just listening. The voices weren't hurried. They were calm, like whoever was there thought they had all the time in the world. A thin film of sweat slid down my back. I wanted to turn and run, but something made me stay. I reached into my pocket for my phone. My thumb trembled as I dialed 911. When the operator picked up, my voice came out as a breath. "There's someone in my house." She told me to stay quiet, stay where I was. Help was on the way. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. But standing there, hearing the slow rhythm of drawers opening, things being moved, my father's closet door creaking open, I couldn't just wait. The bat felt heavier in my hands now. Every step I took toward the voices felt like stepping deeper into someone else's nightmare. The closer I got, the clearer the sounds became. The rustle of clothing, a zipper, quiet muttering. They weren't rushing. They were comfortable, confident. I stopped just outside my parents' room. The door was slightly ajar, a slice of shadowed light cutting across the hallway. I could see the faint movement of a shoulder inside, then another figure bending down. My throat went dry. The operator's voice was still in my ear, soft but urgent. "Sir, stay back. Officers are en route. Don't approach them." But my body had already made the decision my mind couldn't. I could feel the floor trembling slightly beneath my bare feet, the faint buzz of adrenaline pushing through my arms. I took one slow breath and tightened my grip on the bat. Through that narrow crack in the door, I saw one of them turn. A man, tall, broad, something metallic glinting in his hand. He whispered something to the other, but I couldn't make out the words. The house felt too small then, the air too thin. I knew that if I moved another inch, they'd hear me. And yet, I couldn't stand there doing nothing. That was the moment. The breath before everything went wrong. Before the noise, before the chaos. Before I understood what it really means to be alone in your own house. When the sirens finally cut through the night, I was sitting on the front steps, barefoot, the bat still in my hands. I don't even remember walking outside. The police lights painted the street red and blue, and for a while, it felt like I was watching someone else's house, someone else's life unravel. They cleared every room, took photos, asked questions I barely answered. I just kept staring at the open garage, the quiet street beyond it, waiting for something or someone to come back. For days after, I couldn't sleep without every light on. My parents replaced every lock, added cameras, alarms, motion sensors. The house looked safer, but it didn't feel safe. There was a kind of wrongness in the silence after dark, like the house remembered too. The detectives said the men must have known the layout, known when we'd be gone. But what haunts me most isn't that they got in, it's that they didn't take much. A few drawers rifled through, some jewelry, a watch. It felt personal, like they weren't looking for things. They were looking for me. A month later, my dad found my spare car key in the glove box, the one I always kept hidden in the center console. The cops said it was probably just misplaced, but I know for a fact it wasn't there before. Sometimes when I visit my parents and park in that same driveway, the garage light flicks on by itself. Motion activated, they say. But I never see anyone in the camera footage. Just an empty space, breathing quietly under the fluorescent glow. I don't live there anymore, but every time I close my eyes, I still hear that floorboard, that first creak, like it's waiting to happen again. What would you have done if it were your house that night? The call came just after 9. A calm, unfamiliar voice said, "Your mom's in the ER. You need to come now." And before I could even ask who it was, they hung up. For a second, I just sat there, staring at my phone like it might explain itself. The TV was still playing, some cooking show, light and harmless. But all I could hear was the faint ringing that lingered after the call ended. My stomach sank in that way it does when something feels wrong, but you can't say why yet. I checked the number again. Local, no name. Outside, the night was still, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of every small sound. The fridge cycling on, the tick of the wall clock, the faint hum of the streetlight through the window. My mom's had a few health scares lately, falls mostly, bruises she'd downplay with a laugh. I'd been waiting for that call for months, but not like this, not from a stranger. Something about the way they said it. It wasn't panic. It was too calm, too practiced. And as I grabbed my keys, a thought hit me so sharply I almost dropped them. Whoever called never said which hospital she was in. I stood there in the middle of my living room, surrounded by the quiet wreckage of what used to feel like safety. Drawers open, clothes tossed, the faint metallic smell of something that didn't belong. Maybe the oil from a stranger's hands. The air was still, but it felt thick, heavy. Like the house itself was holding its breath with me. The police had already come and gone. They'd walked through, taken notes, said the same tired words. We'll do what we can. But they didn't have to live here. They didn't have to fall asleep in a place that no longer felt like theirs. That first night, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat on the couch with all the lights on, watching the shadows shift across the walls whenever a car passed outside. Every creak of the floor, every hum of the refrigerator made my body tense. And even though I kept telling myself they were gone, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had left something behind, some invisible trace of themselves. The next morning, I started cleaning. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to feel like I had control over something. I vacuumed. I wiped every surface one by one. I picked up the broken picture frames, the empty spots on the shelves. And then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The guest room door was cracked open, just barely. I hadn't even thought about that room since the break-in. I pushed it open with my foot and froze. The bed was untouched, but the desk drawer had been pulled all the way out and set neatly on the floor. Nothing else was disturbed. Just that one drawer, lined up perfectly parallel with the rug. Inside, there were old mail envelopes, receipts, a spare house key, and a printed photograph that didn't belong to me. It was glossy, still new, and it showed the front of my house, taken from across the street. At night, I felt my mouth go dry. I flipped it over with shaking hands. On the back, written in pen, were 3 words: "You left fast." For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at the picture like it might start explaining itself. Then I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police again, but I stopped halfway through dialing. What was I even going to say? That they left me a photo? That they'd watched me leave? It sounded paranoid even to me. That's when I remembered the security cameras. I'd set them up a few months earlier, one by the front porch, another by the garage. I opened the app. The footage from the night before loaded slowly, frame by frame. The timestamp read 9:06 p.m. Right around the time I'd left after getting that call. In the video, I watched myself rush out, fumbling for my car keys. 30 seconds later, headlights appeared. Not mine. A dark SUV pulled into the curb across the street. 2 figures got out, both wearing hoodies. They didn't even look around, just walked straight toward my front door. One of them pulled something from their pocket. A key, my spare key. The one that was supposed to be in that guest room drawer.
The video cut out a minute later. When it resumed, it was almost an hour afterward. The 2 figures came back out. One of them was carrying my TV. The other had a backpack slung over his shoulder. Before getting into the SUV, one of them turned back toward the camera. Not a full look, just a tilt of the head, like he knew I'd eventually see it. The footage ended there. I replayed it over and over until my phone felt hot in my hands. Then I noticed something that hadn't registered before. When the second man opened the car door, the light inside the SUV came on for half a second, just long enough to see the back seat. There were pictures pinned along the headrest. My mom, me, the house, all printed, all taken from a distance. I called the police again, this time nearly yelling into the phone. They said they'd send a car, but it might be a while. While I waited, I shut every curtain in the house, locked every door. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that they hadn't taken the photo by accident. They wanted me to find it. When the police finally arrived, I showed them the footage. They took my statement again, promised to pull traffic camera data, promised to look into it. And when they left, the house went quiet again. Too quiet. I turned off the lights and stood by the window, peeking through the blinds at the street outside. There was no SUV, just the empty space where it had been, but something about the air felt wrong, like the quiet wasn't natural anymore, like it was waiting for something. That night, I barely moved. I just sat there, phone in hand, watching the shadows stretch across the floor. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I woke up to the vibration of my phone on the table beside me. Another call. Same local area code. And before I could stop myself, I answered. A pause. A faint exhale. Then a familiar woman's voice, calm and measured. "Sir, your mother's in the ER again." And this time, she said my full name.
The police traced the number the next day, but it led nowhere. A prepaid phone registered under a fake name. They tell me it was probably over, just a one-time thing. They got what they wanted, one of them said. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But over the next week, little things kept happening that I couldn't explain. The mail started arriving already opened, just slightly, like someone had folded it back carefully. My mom said she had been getting strange calls too, people hanging up as soon as she answered. And then last night, I found something taped to my front door, another photograph. This time, it was of me, sitting on the couch, holding my phone. Same clothes I'm wearing right now. I didn't hear a car, no footsteps, no one knocking. Just the picture, waiting for me when I woke up. Sometimes I wonder if they ever really left, or if they're still out there, watching, waiting for another call I won't recognize. And every time the phone rings now, I freeze, because I know, sooner or later, they'll say her name again, and mine. What would you have done if that call came for you?
The banging started just after 11. Not a knock, pounding, hard enough to rattle the picture frames on the wall. I froze halfway down the hallway, toothbrush still in my mouth, listening to the front door shake in its frame. It wasn't the kind of neighborhood where things like that happened. My street was quiet, almost boring, the kind of place where you recognize every car that glides by. The porch light outside barely worked, flickering weakly against the rain-streaked window. Through the glass, I could see the shape of someone standing there, tall, hunched, moving side to side like they couldn't keep still. At first, I thought maybe it was a neighbor, drunk or confused. But then the voice came, rough, urgent, too close to the door. "I know you're in there. This is my house." The words hit harder than the pounding, because he didn't sound like a stranger. He sounded like someone who truly believed it. He kept pounding, shouting over the sound of the rain. His words were jagged, frantic, but what cut through the most was how certain he sounded. "This is my house. You're trespassing. You don't belong here." I stood behind the screen door, gripping the handle tight, trying to process what I was hearing. The guy didn't look like a junkie or some random drifter. His eyes were wild, yes, but not vacant. They were focused, locked on mine like he was looking straight through me. I tried to keep my voice steady. "You've got the wrong place, man. I just moved in last year." But that only made him angrier. He shook his head hard, water flinging off his hair. "No, you don't get it. I lived here. This is my house." He started rattling off details about the inside, things you couldn't possibly know just by standing on the porch. The way the back door sticks unless you lift the knob, the bathroom door that bangs into the toilet when you open it too fast, even the crack in the ceiling above the hallway light. I hadn't even noticed that last one until he said it. For a moment, I just stood there staring at him, feeling this cold wave crawl up my spine. It was the way he spoke, not like someone guessing, but like someone remembering. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick folder, holding it up to the glass. Rain streaked down the page, but I could still make out my address printed clearly at the top of the lease. His name signed at the bottom. The date said 6 months before I moved in. I felt my throat tighten. He wasn't done. He pulled out his phone next, scrolling through his gallery, showing me pictures. My living room, my kitchen, my bedroom. But the furniture was different. There were people in the pictures I didn't recognize, laughing, cooking, sitting on the same couch I bought from Craigslist. One photo stopped me cold. It was a group shot. 4th of July, maybe. Fireworks outside the window. The man standing there now, smiling. I knew the date, because that was the night I'd been home, alone, watching the fireworks from that same window. I didn't even realize I'd stepped back from the door until I felt the cold tile under my bare feet. My voice came out quieter than I meant it to. I think you should go. He didn't argue. His face shifted, the anger gone, replaced with something else. Calm. Controlled. Yeah, I'll wait right here while you call the cops. Then he turned and walked down the steps, disappearing into the dark without another word. I called the police anyway, still shaking. They showed up fast, 2 officers, both young and already half bored. I explained everything, the folder, the photos, the way he knew things about the house. They exchanged looks, but didn't seem too concerned. One of them asked if I'd been drinking. I offered to show them my lease, my ID, anything. They waved it off, told me he was probably a former tenant, having some kind of breakdown, and that as long as he didn't come back, there wasn't much they could do. When they left, the silence hit hard. I locked every door, double-checked every window. Still, the house didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. The next day, I called my landlord. He sounded surprised, swore he didn't know anyone by that name, said the guy definitely wasn't a previous tenant. He gave me the number of the last couple who lived there. When I reached them, they were just as confused. They said they'd lived there alone for 3 years, no roommates, no visitors matching that description. I wanted to believe it was all over, that it was just a bizarre mistake. But for the next few days, I couldn't shake this crawling tension in my chest. Every time I came home from work, I half expected to find him standing on the porch again. 2 weeks later, I got home around midnight after meeting some friends. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and froze. The air felt wrong, heavy, still. Then I saw it, the mess. Drawers yanked open, clothes dumped on the floor, cushions slashed open. It wasn't random. Whoever did it searched, methodically, like they were looking for something specific. But here's what made no sense. Nothing valuable was missing. My TV, my laptop, even the cash I kept in the kitchen drawer, untouched. The police said there were no signs of forced entry. I told them about the man again, about his keys, about the photos. They didn't say it outright, but I could tell they thought I was stretching the story. One officer even said, "You sure you didn't just forget to lock the door?" The landlord came by the next morning. He looked pale when he saw the state the place was in. He replaced all the locks that day and gave me a new set of keys, still sealed in plastic. That night I sat on the couch in the dark, listening to the rain hit the windows, trying to convince myself it was over. But the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. Every floorboard creaked like footsteps just out of sync with my breathing. I thought about those photos, about how he looked right at the camera in every one of them, smiling like he'd been caught at home. And when I finally went to bed, I caught myself whispering something into the dark like a nervous habit I didn't even realize I had until that moment. I live here now. It didn't sound convincing. Not even to me.
It's been 3 months since that night, and I still flinch whenever I hear someone at the door. The locks have all been changed twice, but sometimes when I put the key in, it sticks, like it's already been turned once before. The landlord swears no one else has a copy. I'm not sure I believe him anymore. I try to tell myself that guy was just unstable, that the photos were doctored, that none of it meant anything, but I can't unsee the way he looked at me through the screen. It wasn't rage or confusion, it was recognition. Like I was standing in his spot, breathing his air, living the life he left behind. The police never found him. No fingerprints, no follow-up. They told me to move on, but how do you move on from something that still feels like it's watching you? Sometimes, when I'm half asleep, I swear I hear the back door lift slightly before the knob turns, just the way he said it had to. And every time, I whisper the same thing I told myself that night, trying to make it true. I live here now. What would you have done if someone showed up claiming your home was theirs and had proof?
Every story tonight started with something ordinary, a door, a phone call, a knock, and ended with someone realizing they were never really safe. Which one will keep you awake tonight? Tell me in the comments. I read every one when the house goes quiet. If you're still here, you're braver than most. Subscribe and see if you can make it through the next one without checking your locks.